Hollywood. The word alone conjures images of glitz and glamour, red carpets and flashing lights. But behind the velvet ropes and million-dollar smiles lies something far darker. A hidden world built on whispers, blood oaths, and shadows that stretch longer than the brightest spotlight. This place doesn't run on talent alone. It thrives on power, control, and sacrifice. They call it show business, but for those who look too closely, it becomes clear. It's a stage for something else entirely. The industry isn't just a machine for fame and fortune. It's a breeding ground for rituals, a pulpit for those who have sold their souls for an audience that will never know the cost. The signs are everywhere, etched into lyrics, hidden in music videos, and scrawled in the contracts signed with trembling hands. For decades, stories have surfaced and been buried just as quickly. Rumors of secret societies, unholy pacts, and stars who rise to fame only after walking through fire. I've spent my career investigating crimes, but nothing prepared me for what I found when I started digging here. Hollywood isn't just corrupt, it's damned. This isn't about glitz. This isn't about fame. This is about the darkest corners of human ambition and the price some are willing to pay. What you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a descent into that darkness. This is Usher's Confession. The call came in at 4:13 a.m. A woman's body had been found on the side of Mulholland Drive, her face twisted in a frozen scream. I arrived on the scene just as the sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows over the quiet, winding road. The victim was Elena Vargas, 28 years old. Her ID was tucked neatly into her pocket, as though someone wanted us to find her. She wasn't dressed for the night, no purse, no phone. Just her lifeless body left like discarded trash. There was no blood, no bruises, no sign of struggle. The coroner would later confirm that her heart had simply stopped, as if terror itself had been enough to kill her. But it was her face that haunted me. It wasn't the typical blank stare of the dead. It was twisted in pure agony, her mouth frozen mid-scream. Whatever she had seen before she died, it wasn't anything human. The only clue was a burnt fragment of a glossy photograph clutched in her hand. It showed a man's ringed hand resting on a boy's shoulder. The boy's face had been burned away, but the hand, I'd seen it before. Sean Diddy Combs. I tucked the fragment into an evidence bag and stood back as the coroner zipped up the body. My gut told me this wasn't a robbery or a random attack. This was something bigger. The next morning, just as I was starting to dig into Elena Vargas's background, two men in suits walked into my office. They didn't flash badges, but they didn't need to. CIA operatives have a way of making themselves known without saying much. "We're here for the Vargas case," one of them said, his tone flat and cold. "Why is the CIA interested in a routine homicide?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. The other man placed a folder on my desk. "You're off this case. Hand over everything you've got, and don't ask questions." I glanced at the folder. Inside was an official-looking order, stamped with seals that might as well have read, "Stay out of this, or else." "National security," the first man added, almost as an afterthought. My chief echoed the sentiment, telling me to hand over my notes and walk away. "You've done enough, detective," he said, his tone more uneasy than firm. But I wasn't about to let it go. The CIA doesn't show up for routine homicides, and they certainly don't take over unless there's something they don't want anyone else to find. I handed them a sanitized version of my notes, but kept the burnt photo fragment hidden. If they wanted this case buried, that meant there was something worth uncovering. Ignoring the CIA's warning, I decided to visit Elena Vargas's apartment. When I arrived, it was clear someone had gotten there first. The place had been stripped bare. No furniture, no personal items, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Even the carpet had been replaced, leaving behind only the faint smell of industrial cleaner. But whoever had cleaned house had missed one thing. Beneath the bed, carved into the floorboards, was a symbol. It was a jagged circle enclosing a horned figure, crude but deliberate. I crouched down, tracing the grooves with my gloved fingers. It wasn't random graffiti. It was a mark, something meant to be hidden. I snapped a photo and sent it to a contact of mine who specialized in religious symbols. When he called me back an hour later, his voice was shaking. "That's not just a symbol," he said. "It's a summoning mark. Old, pre-Christian, used in rituals to call on things you don't want to mess with." I stared at the empty space where her bed had been and wondered what Elena had uncovered and why it had gotten her killed. As I dug deeper into Elena's work, I began to notice a pattern. The number 13 kept appearing in her notes. Names, dates, ages. It wasn't coincidence. In occult practices, 13 is considered a number of transformation and rebellion, representing a break from the divine order. It's a number tied to initiation, often used in rituals to symbolize the shedding of one's old self and the acceptance of something new. But in the music industry, 13 seemed to take on an even darker meaning. Many stars were groomed or discovered at 13, their careers orchestrated by powerful figures. It was as if the age itself marked a point of no return, a point where innocence was traded for fame. Usher was one of them. Taken into Diddy's custody at 13, he was sent to live at the infamous Flavor Camp. On the surface, it was billed as a mentorship program. But according to Elena's notes, it was something far darker. The symbol under Elena's bed was tied to rituals of initiation, rituals meant to bind a person to a larger force. And Diddy, he wasn't just a mentor, he was the gatekeeper. The secret file. Through relentless digging, I tracked down Elena's secret boyfriend, Miguel. He was jittery, gaunt, and clearly terrified. When I told him I was investigating her death, his hands shook as he passed me a sealed envelope. "She told me to give this to someone if anything happened to her," he said, his voice trembling. "But I can't even look at it again. Whatever's in there, it's evil." Inside the envelope were 47 dossiers, neatly compiled and damning in their detail. Each one laid bare a horrifying web of human trafficking, abuse, and exploitation in the music industry. The names were a mix of the powerful and the promising. Executives, artists, and handlers who operated in the shadows, grooming and coercing their victims. One dossier stood out. It detailed the grooming of Usher Raymond by Sean Diddy Combs. The file painted a chilling picture of Usher's early years, focusing on his time at Flavor Camp, a program Diddy used to mold young talent or break them, depending on your perspective. Photographs accompanied the file. One showed a 13-year-old Usher kneeling in the center of a circle. The men surrounding him wore masks, their faces obscured, but their posture was predatory. Another photo showed Usher with Diddy's arm draped over his shoulder, the young artist's face pale and expressionless. The stories in these dossiers weren't just tales of exploitation. They were rituals designed to strip these young artists of their humanity and bind them to a system where their fame was built on servitude. It took weeks of back-channeling and favors to secure a way into Usher's orbit. The case had gone cold, and the CIA interference had made it impossible to investigate through traditional means. That's when I reached out to a contact, a former associate of Diddy's security entourage. This wasn't a guy who owed me anything, but the kind of favor I was asking could blow back on him in ways I didn't want to imagine. Still, he came through. Using his connections, I was able to slip into the backstage area of Usher's Las Vegas residency. Blending in wasn't easy. Everyone back there moved with purpose, dressed in black, their headsets crackling with chatter about the show. I kept my head down and walked like I belonged. My contact had tipped me off on how to get to Usher's dressing room unnoticed. When I arrived, I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but something about the energy in that hallway made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't fear, it was something colder. I knocked once, and a voice from inside called, "Come in." The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with cologne and the faint metallic tang of stage equipment. Usher was seated on a leather couch, calm, composed, and radiating an unsettling confidence. He smiled as if we were old friends. "You've been looking for me," he said casually. His words froze me. How did he know? I hadn't told anyone I was coming here, and I'd never met Usher before in my life. "Looking for you?" I said, masking my unease. "We've never even spoken before today." His smile widened. "Not in the way you're thinking. But I knew you'd find me eventually. Once you see the mark, you can see everything." The mark. My stomach sank as I thought of the jagged symbol carved into the floor under Elena's bed. That mark had been haunting me for weeks, showing up in my dreams and flashing behind my eyes when I least expected it. I placed the photo from Elena's file on the table between us. "I know about Diddy. I know about Flavor Camp. I know what happened to Elena Vargas. And I know what you've been part of." His expression didn't change. "You think you know," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But you don't." I asked him about Vargas, about the rituals, about what she had uncovered. He didn't deny any of it. Instead, he began to talk about his music. "When I perform," he said, "it's not just for the fans. It's a ritual. Every note, every move, it's all for him." I tried one last time to appeal to him. "You were just a kid," I said, leaning forward. "They took you and turned you into something you didn't ask to be. You're a victim, Usher. Diddy and the people around him, they're the ones who should burn for this." Usher didn't respond immediately. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a student giving the wrong answer in a class he had been teaching for years. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "You think I don't know what I am?" he said, his voice calm and unnervingly soft. "You think I'm some lost little boy waiting for salvation? You couldn't be more wrong." He leaned back in his chair, running his fingers over the rings on his hand. They caught the light, glinting like polished steel. "You have no idea what you're talking about, detective, but I'll help you out. I'll give you a glimpse." I didn't interrupt him. I couldn't. My throat felt dry, my chest tight, as though the air in the room had thickened. "I met him when I was 13, Usher said casually, like he was reminiscing about an old friend. "And you know what struck me first? His eyes. They weren't eyes, not really. They were pits, endless, like staring into a black hole, but worse. You don't just see the darkness. You feel it. It swallows you. It knows you. Every secret, every lie, every sin." He paused, his smile widening. "And the voice. It's not loud, not angry. It's quiet like a whisper. It doesn't shout. It doesn't have to. It just slips into your head, wraps around your thoughts, and before you realize it, you're not sure if they're your thoughts or his." I felt myself gripping the arm of my chair, my knuckles white. Usher wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze was distant, as if he was seeing something I couldn't. "He's not some cartoon devil with horns and a pitchfork," Usher continued, his voice almost dreamy. "He's elegance, perfection, the way he moves. It's like he's not touching the ground. And when he speaks, there's this hum beneath the words, like music you can't quite hear, but you can feel in your chest. It's beautiful. Beautiful." The word hung in the air like a curse. "And when he touches you?" Usher laughed softly, shaking his head. "You don't resist. You can't. It's like being submerged in warm water. You just let go. You let him in. And when you do, everything becomes clear." I forced myself to speak. "And what's clear, Usher? That you're just a tool for someone else. That you've given up your soul for, what? Fame? Power?" He chuckled, leaning forward now, his elbows resting on his knees. "You still don't get it. I'm not a tool. I'm the upgrade, the new model. The world's evolved, detective, and so has he. You think he's just some shadow in the dark, pulling strings from the sidelines? Number, he's here, now in me, and I give people what they want." His words hit like a punch to the chest. There was no hesitation in his voice, no trace of doubt. He spoke like a man who had long since accepted who he was, what he was. They don't care what I've done or what I am, Usher continued, his tone almost mocking. They don't want the truth. They want the show, the lights, the music, the escape, and I give it to them. I'm everything they love, wrapped in everything they fear. He leaned back, his smile returning. You could tell them everything, detective. Tell them what you've seen, what you've heard. You think they'd care? They'd call you crazy. Then buy tickets to my next show. That's the beauty of it. I stared at him, words caught in my throat. There was nothing I could say that he hadn't already dismissed. He knew exactly what he was, and he was at peace with it. They made me what I am, Usher said finally, his voice softer now, almost tender, and I've embraced it. Why shouldn't I? It's what I was always meant to be. The world doesn't need heroes anymore. It needs someone who understands its darkness, someone who can channel it. He stood, his movements fluid and unhurried. You wanted the truth, detective. Now you have it, but let's be honest, you were never going to do anything with it, were you? As he walked toward the door, he paused, turning back to face me. For the first time, his smile dropped, replaced by something far more unsettling, a look of complete certainty. I don't perform for people, he said. I perform for him. And every scream, every cheer, every soul that loses itself in my music, it's all for his glory. That's the only truth that matters. With that, he turned and walked out, his footsteps fading into the hallway. But his presence lingered, like a shadow that refused to leave the room. I sat there, long after he was gone, the air still heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. I had come looking for answers, and I'd found them, but they weren't the answers I wanted. Usher wasn't just a victim. He wasn't just a participant. He was the next step, the new face of something ancient and horrifying. And the worst part was, he knew the world would love him for it. That night, I left Vegas shaken. Usher wasn't just a victim. He wasn't just a participant. He was the next step, the new face of something ancient and horrifying. But this isn't just about him. I have the file Elena Vargas died for. 47 dossiers filled with names, photos, and evidence that would destroy everything you think you know about the entertainment industry. From Beyonce to Tyler Perry, from Tom Brady to the president himself. Every name you can think of has a story, and I have the proof. These files expose a machine built on silence and fear, threading through Hollywood politics, media, and finance. The people running it will do anything to protect it. I want to release it. I need to, but I can't do it alone. These people control everything, the media, the narrative, the truth. They buried Elena, and they'll bury me too if I don't have enough support. But I'm ready to take that risk to expose the evil hiding in plain sight. If you're listening, I need you to act. Like, subscribe, share this story. Let the truth be seen. These files are real. I've held them. But will it matter? Will people care enough to stop dancing to the music and turning a blind eye? Usher isn't just a performer, he's a vessel for something darker. And the worst part? He knows the world will keep loving him anyway.